I'm seeing lots of us joining on the phone. Wonderful. What I'm doing is unmuting you so that you can ask questions or chime in whenever you want. Feel free to mute yourself if you have a lot going on in the background, and then you can always just unmute yourself when you're ready to chime in. All right, so we're going to get started here. Just for some history, we were on the phone as a grantee, Mountain Plains grantee group about a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned a presentation I did about getting the most bang for your buck with farm to school. And I know Deanne from Atlantic Schools was mentioning that she was having a hard time with the price of local food and making it work within her budget. And so the group asked that I actually do this presentation for our grantees. So that's what's happening now. Basically, I'm going to cover two main things here. Number one, kind of make the argument that farm to school has value, and that that value that we place on farm to school actually can justify, in some cases, spending a little more on a local product because of what we get out of it. And then the second point that I will try to make here is that we need to be really careful about how we incorporate local food into our school meals so that we don't increase a ton of time, labor, and money and cost for food service programs. And so I'll kind of dig into both of these concepts here. All right. So why, let's try and just throw out some ideas here. Why do we care about farm to school? Why does farm to school matter to us?
Better food. Tastes good.
Tastes good. Better food. Right on.
Today's students are tomorrow's consumers.
Today's students are tomorrow's consumers, right? We want them supporting our local economy when they grow up. What else?
It's helping the community.
Helping the community, yep, giving back to the community. All right, it's early. I'll give you guys a pass. Like we said, fresh, tasty foods. I think, the willingness of students to try new foods when they're exposed to that hands-on education is really important. We see that farm-to-school programs increase children's consumption of fruits and vegetables, increase their awareness of the food system. We actually see increases in program participation, so increases in school meal participation with farm-to-school programs. And of course, there's that economic benefit for the farmer. And so we don't always think of these things as having a monetary value, right? But they do. It's up to a school to decide, do they want to pay a premium for a fresher, tastier product? Do they want to pay a premium for a product or program that will increase their children's awareness of the food system? And so this is where a school needs to decide, what do they value about farm to school, and are they willing to pay a premium for it in an environment where school budgets are really, really tight? One of my favorite benefits of farm to school is what we like to call the multiplier effect. So for every dollar that a school spends on a local product, it generates another 40 cents, or in some cases up to another $1.60 in that local community. And that comes from when that farmer goes out and buys supplies from the local feed store, or goes out to a restaurant in the community, or pays his or her staff. That dollar actually recirculates in the community in a way that has a direct economic benefit for that community. And these $1.40 to $2.60 numbers are from studies that have been done on farm-to-school programs. So this is a good tidbit to show when you're being asked why you are investing in farm-to-school. So like I said, it's up to you to decide the value that you place on farm-to-school and how much you're willing to invest in order to get that value. So for example, this picture is from Ferguson, Missouri, where they wanted to engage high school youth in hands-on culinary skills development and employment skills building. And so they invested in a farm-to-school program that hired high schoolers over the summer to process fruits and vegetables that they would use later on in the school year. And so the value that they got out of farm to school was this youth employment and training piece. And so they were willing to invest in that because it was valuable to them. The Intertribal Buffalo Council works with schools across the Plains region to get buffalo or bison back into school meal programs and to teach primarily Native students the value of the buffalo in their traditional culture. This is a huge bit of importance to them, and so they're willing, schools are willing to invest in that bison meat because of the value it brings to their programs. This is a picture from Livingston, Montana, where they're using hydroponics and aquaponics, so growing fruits and vegetables in conjunction with fish growing systems, to teach kids about science in an incredibly hands-on way. So the value they're getting out of this farm-to-school program is in engaging these otherwise disengaged high schoolers and teaching things like pH and biological systems in a way that they will never forget. So again, they found it valuable to invest in this program because of that outcome that they defined for their community. So those were a couple examples of how different communities have chosen that value that really resonates to them, designed their farm-to-school program around it, and therefore found it worth the investment for them. And here's an example that I'll show. So let's say on the left here we have this wonderful local lettuce. It's bright, it's colorful, it's full of freshness and flavor. And then on the right here, let's say we have some romaine that came from a bag from our regular distributor. And so my point here is this one on the left may cost more, right? It may, to get a bag of this may actually in dollar value, the sticker price would be more. But it's up to you to look at that sticker price and say, okay, here is the real increase in cost for me to get this product. But is it worth it? Can I define enough value that comes from that product so that I could justify that to my superiors and to my team and to my program? And so I guess what I'm saying here is, obviously we have to be good stewards of our funds. We would never want to say otherwise. But it's all about making these smart and informed decisions about where you do want to invest more so that you're actually getting more out of your food service program, so that your increases in costs are justified in the benefit that you're getting out of it for your community. Okay, any questions about this concept so far? This concept that if it indeed costs more, you might actually be getting more out of it? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Also, if folks are not comfortable speaking in front of the group, feel free to shoot me a chat in the chat box, and I'll be the only one who sees it, and I can just answer your question incorporated into the presentation here. Okay, so what are the costs that a school food service director is juggling when he or she is deciding whether or not to invest in a farm-to-school item or a local product? These are the three main buckets of cost: labor, supplies and equipment, and food cost. And roughly, each of these make up about a third of the budget of a school food service program, in my experience. And when you're thinking that food cost is only about $1.25 per meal, these other costs are about $1.25 per meal, and that means that any increase in one, you kind of want to decrease the others in order to make it all work. So you could select a meal, let's say, that has a little bit more of an increased food cost, but you may want to find a way to decrease your labor in order to balance that out, or vice versa. We had a great question come in about, are there studies of how farm to school could actually reduce food waste that we could use as an argument for buying local? And I would say that we have some data that supports that. For example, our farm to school census results show that farm to school program participants say that they see less food waste when farm to school is a part of the program. And we have one or two more studies that do show minor decreases in food waste when that local food and food education comes into play. So let's look at what it looks like on a farm. On a farm, a farmer is dealing with all of the inputs for the season. So fertilizer or compost, seeds, gasoline and lube for his or her equipment or machinery, new boxes to package stuff in, all of that. Land or equipment, if they're leasing a land or if they have these fixed costs like a large piece of machinery or a lease. And then labor, so all of the time it takes for staff to, grow the food, harvest it, deliver it, market, and sell it. And on the farm, about 65 to 75% of the costs are tied up in labor. And so that's where, for them, the cost savings might be. If they're trying to sell to a school and they need to cut the price, it's probably going to come out of labor. And so that's where that's something to think about as we move into the next part of this presentation here. So any questions about kind of what a school is thinking about and what a farm is thinking about when they're trying to decide on paying a price or setting a cost? Gosh, webinars are so hard to get to be interactive. Feel free to chime in at any time. What we're going to jump into next is the bulk of the presentation here. And I'm going to give you some strategies for how to save time, money, and labor when you're making a farm-to-school program work. And some of these are going to address a farmer's budget, and some of these are going to address the school district's budget, but it's all designed to get the lowest price for the school and have that low price work out for the farmer. So my first bit of advice is to talk to farmers. And the way that conversation might look is a school district is looking for a product, and here is how I aim to use it. I'm looking for carrots. I'm looking to actually shred them and dice them on my salad bar, or shred them and put them on my salad bar. And the farm can then say, okay, they need carrots, they're going to be shredded. How can I provide that product in a way that is the most cost effective for my farm? And my suggestion is definitely to use pictures. So to bring this point to life here, this is a picture of a farmer's market. So we have very perfect looking produce. I mean, every one of those zucchinis just looks impeccable, right? Well, a school, if they're shredding that zucchini for zucchini bread, they're not going to need that zucchini to look perfect. In fact, it might be just fine if it has nicks or dings, or if it's a larger size than would be palatable to the farmer market consumer. So for farmers who are used to these direct sale markets, perhaps there are ways that they could provide products to schools in a way that actually could complement their farmers market sales. So maybe they've got 20 zucchini at home that are enormous that they don't want to bring to market, and they need a place to sell them. I think I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. If folks wouldn't mind muting their lines on your end while you're not speaking, I think that might clear that up. The other thing that I wanted to mention is ripeness. So at a farmer's market, a tomato for sale is ready to pop in your mouth. But a school, it may take a few days for them to receive a tomato, wash it, and then actually put it out on the line. And so they're not looking for perfectly ripe tomatoes. They may want tomatoes that are a day or two underripe. So again, it's all about talking about how to make the product work for both. Packaging. A farmer at a farmer's market is packaging things into these little tiny pints or little bags. Well, a school might be able to take something in bulk and therefore save some of that cost of packaging. Order and delivery and payment. This is something that's very different at the farmer's market. This customer is expressing what she wants in real time and handing over the dollar to the farmer. The school district certainly doesn't work that way. So there are definitely some things that you'll have to clear up between the farmer and the school before you can make this all work. So here's an example of a school district talking with a farmer and finding a solution that works. This farmer on the right here, who's gesturing with her hands, grows butternut squash. And the school district was like, we want butternut squash to dice and roast. And she's like, well, I always have these enormous butternut squash that kind of run away on me. And the co-op that I sell them to doesn't want those gigantic butternut squash. But you all actually could get a better yield on those larger squash, get your diced product, and that's something that I have on my farm that I can't always sell. And so she grew an entire field of butternuts and had the tiny little beautiful butternuts go to the co-op at a premium with a sticker on them, in small bins, and then the larger butternuts she sold to the school district in enormous bins without a sticker. Honestly, we had without even washing them, she just placed them in the bin so that they were only being touched once on the farm before they were sent to the school district. So this is a way that this conversation with this farmer actually saved labor and time for her, and the product had a better yield on the school district side. Kale. So for the farmer's market, kale is bunched. Well, this school district worked with these farmers actually to harvest the kale bulk directly into a bin so that the farmers weren't bunching the kale on their end and the school district wasn't unbunching the kale on their end, thus saving labor and time for both sides. So again, you're thinking of these creative solutions that save time and labor and in the end bring down the cost for the school. Deliveries. So one of the biggest costs for a farmer is the time that they sit in this delivery truck and drive around making deliveries. So if you can be cognizant of that, and of course schools have a lot of storage concerns, but just know that that delivery cost is very important. So can you have that farmer fill up the truck? Can you work with a couple other school districts so that the farmer is making one run into town to deliver to you all? Can there be some creative solutions to really bring down that delivery cost? Okay, my second tip for you is to examine your process. So every school district has a process where a food item is placed on a menu. We are going to serve butternut squash on Monday, and magic happens and that product is actually served to a child at lunch on Monday. So in that middle area represented by this black arrow, what is efficient? What is not efficient? How does it all work? And how can a local food fit into that chain in a way that minimizes additional labor, supplies or equipment, or food costs? So you're taking a look at the way food already flows through your system and looking at how to incorporate local food with the fewest interruptions possible. So what's going on in this picture here? Okay, I'll help you out. This woman is painstakingly cutting out the center of all of these melons and dicing them into teeny tiny little pieces. Now, to me, this screams a lot of labor, a lot of time. She's also using up a lot of counter space here. She's actually breaking down a product that when it gets broken down actually starts to spoil very quickly and get mushy. And she's going to have a lot of cleanup here because she's kind of spread out over a broad space. This school district decided to serve wedged cantaloupe with the skin on. And that was so that they could afford a higher quality cantaloupe and cut back on the labor it took to prepare it to put it on the salad bar. And kids are fine taking wedges of cantaloupe as long as the school district is taking care of the food safety concerns. So this is an example of how a school district took a look at their process and said, how can we save time and labor so that perhaps we could afford a local product? So here's a plate here. What do you think on this plate would, to switch it local, be the easiest process for the school district? What would be easiest to localify?
Apples.
Apples, very good. So that is what we like to call a direct substitution. You're probably getting a 40-pound case of apples. Is it really that much of a change, other than to perhaps change that item in your inventory management software to make that 40-pound case a local apple? So direct substitutions are definitely how you can minimize time, labor, and energy in incorporating a local product. But some of these other products may be a different process. So for example, converting from mashed potatoes that are from a box to mashed potatoes that are from real potatoes. Now, what one school district did when they made that swap was actually to use skin-on potatoes with a light skin they didn't have to peel, so that they got the full yield out of the potato, and they actually blended the skin right into the potato. So an example of how when incorporating a new process, they were still mindful of making that impact be as minimally labor-intensive as possible. And so, you know, when you're incorporating a new item, that's obviously the most tricky to do. But let's say you're adding shredded local carrots to a salad blend. That, to me, is a little addition, and that's not all that much more work. So again, you're looking at your tray and you're looking at ways to incorporate local while really being mindful of what that's going to mean in terms of impact on your food service operation. So how it's placed on the menu matters. Typically when we're looking at local food, there are two main ways that we're incorporating those on our trays: as a marketed feature or as a regular ongoing menu item. And to me, a trial run or taste test is sort of how we categorize those items into those two main buckets. And so a trial run or taste test is usually a smaller quantity where you're, trying out your process or you're trying out your recipe or a product. So when we look at a marketed feature, it's something that has this high feel-good value. It's maybe a one-time feature that tells a story or teaches a lesson, might highlight a great partnership or raise awareness, whereas a regular menu item is like in your wheelhouse. It's cost-effective. You have this efficient process for weaving it in time and time again. Your staff become familiar with it and are good at serving it, and they buy in, and then your students like to eat it. So, in our farm-to-school world, we're trying to work up to those menu items that are regular and repeated so that we can maximize our local purchases. But marketed features have their value as well. And when we look at the cost of these products, a marketed feature might be a little more expensive. But because it has that educational value, you're highlighting a partnership, you're only doing it one time, it may be okay to spend a little more money on that feature. Your regular menu items, those are the products that you want to have your process and your product down so that you're not spending absorptive amounts of money on there. Those are your cost-effective products, your reliable partners, so that you're kind of in again, it's in your wheelhouse. And then a trial run might fall somewhere in the middle because you haven't quite honed your process yet, so you're not going to be as cost-effective as you should be. How and where the product is served really matters. If I have a menu and I am portioning a product onto a tray for a child and handing it to that child versus a child self-serves and selects which item they want, the portioned item is going to sell a lot, or the portioned product is going to use up a lot more volume of product because I'm literally handing it to every child. So you're not only thinking about the price per pound of your roasted red potatoes, you're looking at where those red potatoes are positioned in the line and how many kids are actually going to take them. So when you're looking at your total cost, it's this balance of, yes, you want to look at the cost per plate or the cost per pound, cost per serving, but you're also looking at how many servings are actually getting out there. And that way you can balance out your total cost for your program. The salad bar. Look at this beautiful salad bar. A couple items on it might be a little more expensive, but a child is not going to take every single item on the salad bar. A couple kids will take some cucumbers, a couple kids will take some of those radishes. I'll tell you, a lot of kids will take that potato salad on the end. You know, how are you incorporating your products in a way that, knowing how they're served, you can understand what the total cost impact will be? Look at those little green flecks in that bean salad. Those are jalapenos. The school district paid, you know, a good amount for some organic, local jalapenos. But they're just not, you just don't use a lot of jalapenos. So you can feature that product and you can support perhaps a smaller farmer who's growing jalapenos, but it doesn't really have a huge impact on your overall bottom line. So here are just some more examples of different products and how they're served. And this is all going to be specific to your school district. And so is a roasted side where students are serving themselves going to move as much product as, let's say, a condiment or even a garnish? All things to think about when you're deciding where to invest your farm-to-school dollars. Storage crops and hardy greens are the best. Let's brainstorm some storage crops and hardy greens. Who can tell me what a couple of storage crops are?
Squash.
Squash, good.
Potatoes.
Potatoes. Oop, got a weird echo there. All right, I'm going to save you all again. I know it's early, but we're in the Mountain Plains region. We are in a place where storage crops grow really well, and it's cold during the bulk of the school year. And so we need to look for things like cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, kale, collards, winter squash, potatoes, kohlrabi, onions, garlic, beets, turnips, parsnips, carrots. The list goes on and on. Now, these aren't typically things that you see all the time on the lunch line, but we're seeing them more and more, and they really work for farm-to-school programs. They work for schools because they fit in with that school year timeline. A lot of them hit those red-orange colors that we need in order to meet our meal pattern requirements. They're great for teaching lessons about what's in season and what can store through the winter for students. They're easy and delicious to roast. In the last school district I worked for, roasted diced X was a staple on our menu. Roasted diced beets and sweet potatoes, roasted diced butternut squash, roasted diced carrots, you name it. The staff got really good at putting spins on that dish and nailing it in a way that really caramelized and presented a great product for the students. And you don't have to worry about buying all your local food in September and perhaps spending all your farm-to-school investment in September. You can kind of spread it out through the winter months. For farmers, they can actually store up enough product until they can meet your demand, as opposed to wiping their fields bare and not having enough product to meet your school's needs. They are typically a one-time harvest for them, so that means the cost of harvesting is sometimes less than a hand-harvested continuous harvest product like kale. We're talking root crops, I guess. It extends that farmer income into the winter months, and they're really easy to do an aggregated delivery, which saves that delivery cost that we talked about. And then for both, storage crops and hardy greens tend to have a little more wiggle room in terms of timing. So if you're doing a feature and all the kale gets harvested a little bit early, it's okay. You can probably keep it for another week. And they lend themselves well to contracts and forward contracts, which can really, when you're working with a farm and you agree in advance to a volume and in many cases a price, that can sometimes work really well for the school and the farmer. And we can do a whole other presentation on forward contracts some other time. This is an example of a farm that received a contract for about 40,000 pounds of carrots for a large school district. And if you can see that little red barn on their property, what they did with that contract was they took it to the bank and said, we want a great rate on a loan because we want to update our humidity and climate controlled storage facility to make sure that we can expand and store all these carrots properly for this school district. And they were able to get a loan, and they also were able to pull down a small grant as well. So storage crops can work, again, really great for those contracts. You can work with farmers to store a product like potatoes. Now, these are red potatoes. Baby red potatoes fetch a high price at the farmer's market. Everyone wants those little young baby red potatoes. But these giant red potatoes, especially the ones that have some discoloration, these are pretty beautiful, but those do not fetch such a high price at market, and they store a lot better. So the bigger the potatoes, the better it stores. Now, we worked with the farmers to grade out their potatoes and store the larger ones for the school district, and then actually they were able to sell those directly at the farmer's market, the baby potatoes, and fetch a higher price. I saw that, Sharon, you raised your hand, but then it went back down again. Did you have something you wanted to mention? Oh, the screen is not advancing. Are you guys seeing the red potatoes picture? Oh, Sharon is not seeing it. Okay, other folks are. Sharon,
yes,
I'm wondering if this is, okay, are you, okay, maybe it was just going slow for you. I'm sorry about that. This is being recorded, and I will send out all the slides as well. So if something got goofed up for you, I'm sorry, and we will be sure to get this out to you. And you are all welcome to use these slides in your own uses. So the other stuff I'm going to mention about here, marketing and education. We all know that school meal programs incorporate a lot of marketing. And sometimes we find ourselves spending so much time on marketing like a special event that it almost becomes a time suck. You're like spending so much time that it's not even necessarily worth it. So when we have our marketed features, these are things that really are special events that are going to take a lot of time. And we want to be really careful with those because we don't want to spend all of our lives planning for marketed features to the point where our regular menu items fall to the wayside. So our regular menu items are these things that kind of are ongoing, and we're maybe doing some light marketing of them, but they should really be moving along without a ton of energy when it comes to marketing. Now, I will say that taste tests can have two different goals. A taste test could be educational, or a taste test could gather information for a district. So a taste test could actually expose a child to a new flavor profile, and we're not really asking that child whether or not they like it because they probably have never had it before, and they may not like it, but the point is we're exposing them. Versus if we are testing out a process, if we are testing out a product to see if kids will like it, then that's gathering information for the school district, and that's a different purpose. So I would say whenever you are designing marketing and education, think about what the goal is. Is it educational? Is it gathering information? Are you sharing about a partnership? Are you trying to increase participation? What is your goal? And then spend a proportionate amount of time on that feature so that you're not overtaxing yourself. I will share a story about a flop. We had a farm grow a bunch of purple potatoes for my school district, the last school district I worked for, in order to do a feature for the Minnesota Vikings. We were doing purple potato salad. Now at this school, where we brought in a former Viking and did a whole bunch of activities with students, let me tell you that purple potato salad flew off the line. At all the rest of the 74 schools in the district, it was a total flop. Like, kids were like, why is my potato salad purple? This is gross. They totally didn't get the memo. And so this was an example where, maybe we didn't invest enough in this marketed feature to actually make it worth it. Maybe we needed to just focus on one school. What was our goal with this purple potato salad? And so, again, it's just an encouragement to really pay attention to what you're marketing and why you're marketing and how much time it's taking you. This school district, you might be able to see that these little black dots sprinkled throughout the menu are little apples. That indicates a local product. This is an example, in my opinion, of ongoing marketing. It's relatively easy to throw an apple on the menu every time a local product is in use. And it speaks directly to parents who are making decisions with their kids about what to eat at school. And so this is an example of something that you might use as somewhat of an ongoing marketing strategy. Now, I will say, beware of the opportunity buy. And to me, an opportunity buy is when a farmer calls you up and says, hey, Sue, I have got these red potatoes, and they're amazing, and you should totally buy them and feature them as a special local day. Well, I do want to tell you a brief story. I had a farmer call me up with that same enthusiasm, saying, Andrea, I'm just getting myself here. We have these rainbow carrots. You are going to love them. We think you should buy them, and we'll give you a great deal, and they should totally be a feature on your menu. And, our team was like, great, that sounds like an awesome opportunity. We'll do a micro purchase, and we'll do a feature. And so we set up a new menu item, and we tell all the staff how to serve them and get everyone jazzed up. Great price. Well, it turns out when the product was delivered, they were moldy. By the time that we sorted through all these carrots and got a usable portion, the price that we had thought was so great was now tied up in all this labor and a loss of yield, so it ended up not being that great. All the staff is like, Andrea, why do you always do this? Farm to school never works, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of lost some credibility there because you tried to take advantage of this opportunity buy, but without really thinking of the time, labor, and energy it would take because the product ended up arriving bad. So I guess all I'm saying is with this example that you want to be careful when you're marketing and really have your product lined up in advance. I'm a big proponent of forward contracting, but you want to make sure that you're working with trusted, established partners, and that when you're marketing a product, you're really taking the time to make sure that it is going to work out, because that's when you are in the spotlight. We're coming up on the hour here, so I'm going to breeze through these so we have a few moments for Q&A. Track what you do. Everything that you do this year and that you track will make things 10 times easier for next year. Oh, when we incorporated those carrots, gosh, it was a ton more labor. The staff hated it. Let's cut those back. Let's increase volumes of the potatoes that everyone loved. Our staff need to be on board when farm to school is coming into play. Why does farm to school resonate with them? We hear a lot that it's the chance to get back to actually working with fresh, flavorful ingredients, the chance to take pride in the product that's being offered to students. You know, the different things may resonate with different people. A chance to work with the, you know, garden club and bring in some of their garden expertise. It totally depends. And I will say on the right here is in Kansas City, the school district actually used Farm to School as a vessel for culinary staff training. So this is actually them in the bottom left working on processing butternut squash, but they used Farm to School as a platform from which they could do some really fun hands-on staff training. And of course, start small. We mentioned the apple, you know, that's an easy win, and that's always a great place to start and to celebrate. So again, I will share all of these slides, but basically Farm to School takes creativity and it takes excitement and fun because, again, you have to really be thinking creatively about how you're going to save that time and energy and labor and make Farm to School work and extract that value from local food for your school district, and that can be really fun and rewarding. So I will stop blabbering on and open it up to questions. Feel free to either shout out a question or if you're a thinker, think on it and type it out here, and I will read out your question and answer it.
Andrea, I think these are great examples, especially the beginning part when you're talking about how to talk to your farmer, because as a former farmer and working farmers markets and things like that, it really made a difference when people would come to us at the farmers market and say, hey, next week, would it be possible to get, you know, a bushel of potatoes, and we don't care, we want your grade 2 or whatever, because we're going to use them for this. And man, it helped us so much. It took product off of our hands that we couldn't use, and we just felt like we were helping somebody who could really use them, you know, because we wouldn't be able to sell them for a good price on the market, you know, at a farmer's market, but we did get something for them, and we knew they're getting used. So to me, that was really the best part right here, to just express that to everybody, that talking to your farmers, they're looking for markets to get rid of some of those products that they can't always sell. So I thought that was great. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, that's great to have corroboration from someone who's very experienced in farming. So yeah, thank you. Any other questions? I know it was a lot to digest.
Do you feel the micro purchases work best overall?
That's a great question. I think micro purchases can be a great way to purchase in that trial run category. So I want to try out these kohlrabi things that everyone's talking about. I'm going to bring in some and do some taste testing, maybe do a full run on the menu and see how it goes. In my opinion, some of the small purchases and even sometimes formal purchasing can work when you're in a position to forecast out your purchases for the coming year and work with farmers in advance to establish a volume and price for the coming year. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
It also depends on the size of the district. I mean, if most of your purchases are not going above the micro purchase threshold of $3,500, that might totally work for you, and that's fine. All right, well, if anyone has more questions, do not hesitate to shoot me a note. What I will do is I will send out the recording as well as the slides. Feel free to use the slides in any of your own presentations with partners and stakeholders, and I will hope to see most of you at the National Farm to Cafeteria Conference in Cincinnati in April. So I'm sorry this wasn't more interactive. I think it's sometimes hard to make that work via webinar, but maybe we can find a better way to do that. And thank you for coming and listening.
Thank you, Andrea. It was great.
Thank you.